Hi class, so today's lecture is not going to be too long. I'm going to be putting you onto task with group members that you have been working with in class so far. So I'll be creating new groups and I will be assigning you a research per group, okay? And you will work on that, which I will go over a little later in this slide or in this PowerPoint. Okay, so we know that research is a very important part of psychology and that research is never absolute, right? We can never prove anything, and hence evaluation is a very important part of our psychology program. We have so far evaluated research in specific. This video will go over how we will be evaluating theories as well in the cognitive approach, because this approach is going to introduce you to a lot of theories and models of cognitive processes. Okay, so to begin with, we will quickly go over the acronym that we already are aware of, which is GMECT. Okay, this acronym we've used extensively to evaluate our research, and it is very important for you to do that in your long answer questions for paper 1 and paper 2 as well. And for HLs, it's important for you to understand methodology at this level for paper 3 as well. So to begin with, G stands for gender, okay? We know that a lot of researches to begin with or in the past have been androcentric, which basically means it's been male participants that have been involved in most of the researches. So having said that, is that research that you are currently studying or evaluating androcentric, or does it involve other genders as well? Okay, if it's only androcentric, or if it's I don't know, the opposite of that. If it's with just female participants or just a specific gender, does it then apply to other genders? That is basically what is being evaluated with this point. Methodology, we have done this extensively. Methodology would evaluate first to begin with the internal validity, right? We know validity. Internal validity would be is the variable that is being considered, or the construct that is being considered, truly studied through the procedure that the research has put together, right? And that is very relevant to the cognitive approach, because we're not studying the level of hormone or the level of brain activity, right? We are studying constructs that have researchers who have worked on understanding it and trying their best to put together a methodology to objectively observe and evaluate it or study it, okay? So now, having said that, were they successful in really studying that construct is the question, okay? The second thing is with external validity, which looks at generalization, right? Can the results that we have obtained be validly generalized to a general population, right? To other cultures and to other genders. Again, this does refer to the gender and culture part of this acronym, but generalization is, can the results from the participants of this experiment be applied to other people around the world, okay, or in that context? So another way to generalize is to see if whether the experiment results can be generalized to real life situations. Again, an important point to consider in the cognitive approach, because the majority of the researches are lab experiments. We know from the principle that there was a lot of effort put into empirically studying cognitive processes, okay? So then, are we able to apply what we have found in our experiments to real life situations, okay? And then there's reliability, where we consider possible biases in the sampling, right? Possible biases in the researcher, the participants, are there demand characteristics involved? So those are the things that you will evaluate in terms of reliability. And was there possibly any triangulation? That is also something to consider. So ethics, we know ethics really well so far, or so I hope. Okay, you will be looking at the principles, but evaluating in more specific terms of, was there consent, was there any deception, undue stress or harm, standardized instructions, which involved briefing and debriefing, right to withdraw, all of those factors, okay? If these aren't really relevant to that research, it's not necessary for you to evaluate it in your answers, but it is a good point to consider, okay? So culture, like I said, that comes into generalization. Is it, I mean, again, going back, a lot of research has been conducted in the United States. So how can we, or can we rather, then generalize what we found in an American population to people in other parts of the world? Okay, so that's what culture looks at. And time might not necessarily be very relevant to this approach. It would be in terms of culture, because culture is dynamic, and that is what we will be studying in the social cultural approach. But there could be some points of evaluation where you can check whether what was studied, let's say 100 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, is it relevant today? Okay, and one of the constructs or concepts that we've come across in the past that does bring up this question is pheromones, right? Pheromones were supposed to communicate sexual attraction, but the question is, are we still relying on pheromones to decide who we are attracted to? Does it really communicate attraction anymore? So the fact there is that, we're reliant on online dating. We're also reliant on the fact that the dynamics of relationships are changing. We want companionship and not just reproduction anymore, right? So again, time. Was this research that was conducted so many years ago still relevant to today and the dynamics of life today and cognitions today? Okay, so this is GMECT. I'm not going to go any further into this. You should be well versed with it by now. But what I'm going to go into next is a new acronym that I want you to use to evaluate theories. Like I said, this approach will have a lot of theories and models, so it is relevant for you to evaluate them as well. So teacup, okay? Teacup is the acronym that I'm introducing you to, and it really has to do with evaluating theories. Theories in psychology are good if they're able to describe behavior and cognitions, and if they're able to predict future behavior and cognitions. Okay? So that is the basic purpose of developing a theory in psychology, right? To describe and to predict behavior and cognitions. So the first letter of the acronym is T, testable, okay? A good theory has to be falsifiable. Like I said, nothing can be proved in psychology. There's always room for improvement. There's always some kind of drawback that comes into the study of behavior. Human beings are very complex. So good theory should be able to be falsified, which then means that there needs to be good procedures put in place, okay? If we cannot test it, right? If we cannot put in a good procedure to test it, it is not a good theory, okay? So this is very important in the cognitive approach, because we went from psychoanalysis, which was all about subconscious, and then we went into being like, okay, this is a very important scientific field, and we need to try testing behavior in objective, observable manners, okay? So empirical support. A good theory has evidence to support it. We have been going through a lot of concepts and a lot of theories, and we've provided research evidence. So a good theory then requires this evidence. If it just is a theory without any evidence, it's only an idea, okay? Or it's just conceptual theory. It is not something that can be applied, which is the next point of application. I have talked about schema theory and how it can be applied to several different things, such as, for example, schema theory has been used to develop a whole type of psychotherapy, which is schema therapy, right? And this is used especially with personality disorders. So that is one application of schema theory, okay? But what makes a good theory is its applicability. If this theory is not capable of being applied to different areas, let's say sports psychology or forensic psychology or business psychology, then it really has no relevance, okay? There needs to be some purpose of this theory. And it can be very specific to behavior as well. For example, it alleviates depression. One of the things that we can look at is cognitive behavioral therapy. Our understanding of negative cognitions helps us then alleviate depression or manage depression by changing those cognitions. So those are applications of simple theories in this approach, okay? Clearly defined variables, again, that goes back to construct validity. Are we truly studying by this procedure what we want to study. Okay, if I'm studying schema theory, is my procedure really studying schema theory? Okay, unbiased, we've already gone over this in GMECT. Is this theory applicable to both genders or other genders as well? And is it applicable to all cultures, or is it just applicable to a specific culture? And this can be, some of the questions that you asked had to do with, in the Padlet, had to do with, can our understanding of memory be generalized to all populations, right? Our memory encoded and stored in different ways depending on which culture you belong to, and also maybe the gender of participant has. Okay, and finally, like I said, there is no point of a theory if it cannot predict behavior. Okay, so does your understanding of schema theory help you understand, let's say, decision making? Is it able to help? Are you able to predict decision making based on your understanding of schema theory? So that's one. That's the last point of teacup. Okay, what you're going to do next is an assignment. You will be working, like I said at the beginning of this lecture, you'll be working with people you work with usually in class. Okay, this is a group assignment and will be scored, okay, out of 12, 6 marks for research and 6 marks for critical thinking. I have assigned you each a research which you will read through and then discuss in your group the following questions. Once you've done that, you will also evaluate schema theory. Okay, in terms of teacup, I want you to go over every single letter of TEACUP. And once you've done discussing these things, right, you will put together a document. It'll be nice if you did this online so all 3 of you or all 4 of you were able to provide input at the same time. You will write the research in terms of aim, methodology, sample, results, and conclusions. Okay, and then you're going to answer these questions. Conclusion would really be with regards to what was the role of the schema in this experiment. Did it influence what the participants were paying attention to? Did it influence, like for example, in the Bransford and Johnson experiment that I conducted on you guys, the schema or the lack of the schema activation by not providing you the context did influence the level of comprehension that each of the groups had. Okay, so then what is the conclusion that I can come up from that procedure? Okay, that is what I want you to answer there. What are the processes involved? Assimilation and accommodation. I went over this. So is there any assimilation and accommodation that is happening in this procedure? So that is what you want to look at and evaluate research in terms of GMECT, like you always have. Okay, so once you've discussed this, put this together in a document and upload it on ManageBack. I'm just going to go with ManageBack because that is a practice we have followed so far.